Hi, friends of the planet. Miro here. Today, I'm so excited to have with us a very special guest, Congressman Ted Liu of California's 33rd Congressional District, which spans a lot of the coast of Los Angeles County. Lots of sunshine, lots of nature. And Congressman Liu is one of the biggest climate champions in Congress. So we're so thrilled to have him with us today. And Congressman, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Honored to be with you today.
So, Congressman, I wanted to ask, in 2019, you released the Climate Solutions Act in the 116th Congress, which called for 100% of electricity to be generated from renewable sources by 2035. And just this week, we had a coalition of more than 150 environmental groups that asked President Biden to enact a clean electricity standard, which would push us to generate 100% of our electricity from clean sources of power by 2035. So I wanted to ask, how did you select the metrics of your bill 2 years ago? And do you think it's paved the way for the climate policy discussions we're having today?
Thank you for your question. We consulted with a number of experts and they told us that 2035 was feasible. And so that's why we selected the date of 2035. Now, as all of you know, it's not easy to predict the future, but we do believe 2035 is a feasible date to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I think it really set the path for how we're talking about what's feasible today. And I know that a report from UC Berkeley came out that showed that we can achieve a lot of these clean electricity goals with the technology we have today. So that was very prescient on your part, but it's great that we have kind of a baseline of legislation to work off of and to build on.
And one of the reasons you introduced the legislation is to highlight the issue and to push the envelope. We knew that in a Republican-controlled Senate, it just wasn't going to pass. But we wanted to still put the bill out there so we can tell the public, this is what the experts think is feasible, and this is what we want to have happen when we do get Democratic control. And now that we have it, very pleased that people are focused on 2035.
Your bill in 2019 didn't have a single Republican co-sponsor. And so I wanted to ask, is it realistic to think that Republicans would sign on to any climate legislation that addresses the crisis at the scale that's needed? Specifically in the Senate, is reconciliation the only chance to pass comprehensive legislation?
The Republican Party is shifting somewhat on climate change. 2 decades ago, they wouldn't even really acknowledge that there was climate change. Most of them now at least acknowledge there's climate change in Congress. So that is a shift. Many Republican legislators are unwilling to really work on any legislation that then tries to do something about the climate change. So we have to keep working and keep pressing the issue. I do think that if we have to get something through reconciliation, that's possible, but it'd be much better if it was done on a bipartisan basis.
I just want to ask, are you able to speak to if you've heard, behind closed doors from some of your Republican colleagues, if they might be willing to do something about climate, but perhaps the politics in their party is preventing them from leading on the issue?
What's interesting when you talk to a number of Republicans in the Senate or in the House, they understand that climate change is real now, and they understand it's causing more extreme weather events. They're just unsure of how to handle that. Many of them get a bunch of money from the oil and gas industry. Many of them have voters that still think climate change is a hoax. So they're in this position where if they do support climate change legislation, they're worried about getting a primary challenge. So we have to keep on educating all the American people, especially all the voters, to continue to tell them that climate change is real and it can have very devastating effects if we don't start taking strong action now.
Speaking of those devastating effects, I mentioned earlier that your district spans a lot of very vulnerable coastline in California. So it's very much ground zero for climate change, including wildfires and sea level rise. And can you talk about what federal inaction on climate change, the risk that might pose to, the 700,000 people that call your congressional district home?
Decades ago, scientists predicted that with global warming and climate change, you're going to see more extreme weather events such as wildfires and hurricanes and so on. And we've seen that in terms of wildfires in California. We've had a lot of really massive and lethal wildfires, including one in my district. Actually, there were many that touched parts of my district, but one in particular, the Woolsey fire, really devastated a lot of the northern part of my district. I visited with some of their families and some of their folks that were impacted. And then you spend all sorts of government resources now to rebuild. And so if we don't deal with climate change, not only are we going to have these devastating disasters, we're then going to spend a bunch of taxpayers' money recovering from these disasters. So it's not only good for protecting us, it's also good for our economy and to stop the waste of taxpayer dollars.
And to fit into what you just said about, we need to act proactively to ensure that this doesn't become more costly and more deadly down the line. So can you speak a little to how President Biden's American Jobs Plan would benefit your district specifically?
Now, I'm thrilled that President Biden has championed the American Jobs Plan. That is going to be a transformative law that's going to help create lots and lots of jobs across America. According to a recent Georgetown study, the American Jobs Plan will create or save 15 million jobs. In addition, we have in this jobs plan funding for R&D research to look at resilient technologies and other technologies that can help us in the 21st century for more clean, renewable energies. It's also going to make sure that we protect our critical infrastructure in case we get additional cyber attacks. When we look at how it's going to be allocated among all the districts, a lot of it will depend on the needs of each particular district. My district does have some of the worst traffic gridlock in the nation, and we also do have roads and highways we need repaired. We also have rising sea levels, and there's a lot of benefits my district can have from the American Jobs Plan.
It really seems like there's something in it for every American wherever they live. So it's great to see that it can benefit Los Angeles to Indiana, to the Rust Belt and beyond. To end on a positive note, I wanted to ask, what inspires you to be a climate champion in Congress?
I want to make sure that our environment is at least the same as, or even better for our children and our children's children than what we have now. And if we don't do something about climate change, we're going to leave the next generation with a massive problem that's going to cause increased famine, increased extreme weather events, increased death. And to me, climate change is an existential crisis if we don't deal with it.
Absolutely. I hope more of our elected officials come to see the crisis in this way and also the opportunities that exist to do something about it. So, Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. This was really great to know about how you approach these issues and how they affect your district specifically. So thanks again.
Thank you.